The heat in the attic pressed against my chest like a physical weight. Sweat dripped off my chin and pooled on the warped, splintered floorboards. I pressed my cheek against the cold metal of the air conditioning vent. 2 stories below me, in the manicured backyard of our Charlotte home, the sound of clinking champagne glasses echoed through the warm night air. Then, her voice floated up through the ductwork. Vanessa. Her tone dripped with fake, trembling sorrow. She told the crowd of wealthy donors how exhausting it was to be a dedicated mother. She wiped away a perfectly timed tear and explained to the audience that her stepdaughter was safely locked away in a residential psychiatric facility. Finally getting the intensive help she needed, the crowd murmured their deep, collective sympathy. I sat in the suffocating dark of my deadbolted prison. My thumb hovered over the glowing screen of a cracked tablet. My breathing remained perfectly even. She thought I was a ghost. She was about to find out exactly how effectively a ghost can dismantle an empire. My father, Garrett, had legal access to an annual $80,000 medical stipend meant exclusively for my care. He handed every single penny of it directly to Vanessa. She and my spoiled stepbrother, Spencer, blew the funds on luxury cars, designer clothes, and expensive country club memberships. Meanwhile, I survived on stale bread and whatever cold leftovers they decided to shove under the gap of my heavy, deadbolted door. They openly called me the feral animal upstairs. I watched through the floor vent every morning as Vanessa sat at the marble kitchen island, posting crying selfies on local community pages. She wrote long, agonizing paragraphs about the endless heartbreak of caregiver burnout. The donations and sympathy poured in effortlessly. Neighbors dropped off expensive casseroles and whispered fervent prayers for her strength. Minutes later, she would climb the stairs, kick my solid wooden door, and laugh with Garrett about how unbelievably easy it was to fool the entire neighborhood. The cruelty kept my mind sharp. They broke my spirit when I was younger. But today, my mind operated like a steel trap. The financial reality of their lavish lifestyle was rapidly catching up to them. Vanessa had secretly taken out massive, predatory loans against the equity of the house. She was drowning in insurmountable debt. She desperately needed Monday morning's court hearing. That was the day a probate judge would rule on granting her permanent, absolute conservatorship over my life. If she won, she would instantly unlock my $3,200,000 trust principal. If she lost, she faced immediate bankruptcy and a potential federal fraud investigation. Her soaring desperation made her sloppy. Last week, she ordered Spencer to clear out his old junk from the upstairs hallway. He hastily shoved a cardboard box into the attic and slammed the door shut. He never bothered to check what sat at the bottom of the pile. I dug through the tangled charging cords and broken video game controllers until my fingers brushed against smooth glass. It was his old, slightly cracked tablet. The screen lit up brightly when I held the power button. Spencer always bought the newest gadgets and threw the old ones away like useless trash. He handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy his mother. Spencer never changed his passwords. He was far too lazy for basic digital security. The tablet automatically connected to our home's guest network the second it booted up. The battery indicator showed 40%. I was online. I refused to scream for help. I ignored the urge to post frantic, unbelievable messages on social media. I became a silent, calculating predator. For weeks, I sat silently by the door and tapped the record button. Every single time Vanessa stood outside hurling vicious threats, I captured it. I recorded her loudly bragging about the predatory loans. I recorded her mercilessly mocking my dead mother. I recorded Garrett slurring his drunken words, telling her to just keep me quiet until the Monday court date. I gathered hours of crystal clear, undeniable audio. I drafted a single, concise email to Arthur Vance, the ruthless estate lawyer my biological mother had trusted with her will. I attached the audio files as proof of life and extortion. Then hit send. His reply arrived exactly 12 minutes later. 3 sharp words, "We are coming." I scrolled through the synced family calendar on the device. The twisted truth behind the charity gala clicked into place. This was never just a fundraiser. Vanessa invited the wealthiest, most influential members of Charlotte society to gather high-status character references. She planned to walk into that courtroom on Monday morning with a thick stack of letters proving she was a neighborhood saint. If she succeeded, my life and my legacy would be erased forever. I stared at the calendar event, Saturday evening, 7 o'clock. The deadline was set. I paced the length of the attic, my bare feet silent against the rough wood. The anticipation hummed in my veins like electricity. Every time my stomach cramped from severe hunger, I pictured the exact look on Vanessa's face when her empire crumbled to dust. She spent 3 entire years trying to bury me alive. She completely forgot that seeds grow in the dark. The audio files were safely stored on Arthur's secure legal servers. The gears of justice were already turning in the background. However, I wanted more than just a quiet courtroom victory. I wanted her unmasked in front of the exact people she spent years manipulating. I wanted the neighborhood to see the monster hiding behind the expensive designer makeup and the fake tears. The tablet battery required careful, meticulous management. I spliced a frayed charging cable into a bare wire near the ceiling light fixture, drawing just enough current to keep the device alive. I reviewed my strategy a dozen times over. The gala was my battlefield. The night of the gala finally arrived. Downstairs, the house buzzed with chaotic, nervous energy. Vanessa was drinking heavy pours of expensive champagne and screeching at the terrified catering staff. She was frantic, completely obsessed with projecting absolute perfection to her wealthy guests. Around 6 o'clock, she stomped heavily up the stairs to deliver my daily ration. She shoved a paper plate holding a dry crust of bread under the door gap. She hastily jammed the key into the lock and twisted it with violent force. Her drunken haste betrayed her. The heavy deadbolt slammed against the metal door frame, failing to slide properly into the strike plate. She yanked the key out and marched back downstairs, completely oblivious to her critical error. The distinct lack of a solid mechanical click echoed in my ears. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs, yet my hands remained perfectly steady. The lock was disengaged. I waited patiently until the backyard filled with the low hum of classical music and wealthy, arrogant chatter. Using the stiff metal spine of an old 3-ring binder from Spencer's junk box, I wedged it deep into the door gap. I applied steady pressure, shimming the heavy wood until it drifted open. The cool air of the air-conditioned hallway washed over my sweating face. Freedom tasted like polished hardwood and expensive floral arrangements. I crept down the stairs, sticking closely to the shadows. The house was entirely empty. Every single guest was outside on the lawn. I slipped into the master bedroom. The walk-in closet smelled overwhelmingly like Vanessa's suffocating perfume. I ignored her endless racks of designer clothes and went straight to the locked cedar chest in the back corner. A heavy bronze paperweight shattered the flimsy decorative lock. Inside, folded in protective plastic, was my biological mother's vintage emerald green evening gown. I slipped it over my shoulders. The heavy silk settled against my skin like a suit of armor. I looked in the full-length mirror. The pale, starved girl from the attic was gone. I looked exactly like the woman Vanessa utterly despised. I picked up the tablet, The open home network gave me full, unrestricted access to the backyard's Bluetooth smart projector. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, hidden safely in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment. Vanessa stepped onto the raised patio stage. The crowd fell completely silent. She tapped the microphone twice. Her voice echoed smoothly over the manicured lawn. I connected the tablet. The pairing icon blinked solid blue. My finger rested heavily on the play button. The trap was armed. Vanessa dabbed her eyes with a delicate lace handkerchief. She asked the crowd for generous financial donations to support families dealing with violent mental illness. She spoke about profound sacrifice. She spoke about her endless devotion to my well-being. I tapped the screen. The massive projector screen behind her violently glitched. The polished slideshow of stock charity photos vanished instantly. My trap bypassed the visual feed and completely seized the master audio channel. Suddenly, Vanessa's screeching, authentic voice blasted through the expensive surround sound speakers. Eat your stale bread. You little parasite. I am draining every single cent of your dead mother's money. The vicious words echoed off the brick walls of the estate. The wealthy donors gasped collectively. Several people dropped their crystal champagne glasses, shattering them across the stone patio. I stepped out of the shadows and walked confidently onto the patio in my mother's emerald dress. The evening breeze caught the heavy fabric. Vanessa spun around. Her face drained of all color, leaving her thick foundation looking like a pale, cracked mask. She stared directly at me. Her mouth opened wide, yet absolutely no sound came out. Garrett stood frozen by the outdoor bar. Absolute terror washed the color out of his face. Urgent whispers rippled through the stunned crowd like a shockwave. Before Vanessa could muster a single convincing lie, the heavy wooden side gate swung wide open. Arthur Vance strode onto the patio. He was flanked closely by 2 uniformed police officers. Arthur kept his voice perfectly level. His sheer presence commanded the entire yard. He served Vanessa and Spencer with immediate, legally binding trespassing warnings and ordered them completely off the property. The trust was officially frozen on the spot. Vanessa shrieked loudly and tried to lunge toward me. But the towering officers stepped firmly in her path. The donors backed away from her, as if she were carrying a highly contagious plague. Her social empire collapsed into ash in less than 2 minutes. Arthur pulled me aside and delivered a crucial, sobering warning. Garrett's name was still legally on the property deed. The police could not legally force my father to leave without a formal eviction order signed by a judge. Arthur handed me his crisp business card. I am going straight to the courthouse to prepare the emergency injunction for Monday morning. He said, lock your bedroom door tightly. Do not trust your father for a single second. Arthur and the police escorted Vanessa and a highly confused Spencer out to the dark street. The wealthy guests scrambled frantically to their luxury cars, desperate to flee the scandal. I stood alone on the patio, staring blankly at Garrett. He refused to meet my eyes. He grabbed a fresh bottle of scotch and scurried into the den like a frightened rat. The house fell completely silent. I sat in the darkness of the kitchen, waiting for the inevitable. At 2:00 in the morning, the heavy deadbolt on the back door clicked. The door unlatched. Garrett cowardly scurried back toward the hallway, leaving the door unlocked behind him. Anticipating Vanessa's desperate, violent retaliation, I moved fast. I placed the cracked tablet securely on the kitchen island's wireless charging pad, ensuring it possessed continuous power. I angled the camera precisely toward the center of the room and initiated the recording. I ducked into the deep shadows behind the walk-in pantry door. Seconds later, Vanessa burst aggressively into the kitchen. She slapped the harsh overhead lights on. Her hair was a wild, tangled mess. Her expensive designer dress was wrinkled and heavily stained with sweat. She frantically pulled open cabinet drawers, grabbing a heavy ceramic plate and smashing it violently against the tile floor. She grabbed a sharp, serrated steak knife from the wooden block without a single second of hesitation. She intentionally slashed her own forearm. Deep red blood welled up instantly. She dropped the knife, pulled her phone from her pocket, and dialed emergency services. She screamed into the receiver, sobbing hysterically. She claimed her deranged stepdaughter had broken out of confinement and viciously attacked her. When the sirens wailed loudly in the distance, Vanessa sat comfortably on the floor, smirking proudly at the blood dripping from her arm. She fully expected the police to haul me away permanently on a psychiatric hold. The front door burst open. 2 officers rushed into the bright kitchen, hands resting cautiously near their duty belts. Vanessa wailed dramatically, pointing a trembling finger toward the dark hallway. I stepped out of the pantry. My hands remained casually at my sides. My voice remained completely silent. I calmly walked over to the kitchen island and picked up the tablet. I tapped the screen and handed it directly to the lead officer. The crisp, brightly lit video showed Vanessa shattering the plate and deliberately slashing her own arm. As the officer watched the damning footage, I handed him a thick manila folder I retrieved from Arthur's paralegal earlier that evening. These are forged medical documents my stepmother purchased on the black market. I stated clearly, they claim she suffers from violent, self-harming delusions. The officer looked from the video evidence to the medical files. And then down at Vanessa, the blood completely drained from her face again. The police used her own meticulously planned legal trap against her. Paramedics strapped a screaming, thrashing Vanessa to a heavy gurney under a mandatory, involuntary psychiatric hold. They handcuffed Garrett roughly and dragged him out for felony complicity and severe child endangerment. Spencer arrived in a cheap taxi 30 minutes later, completely cut off and locked out of the estate. His finance sports car was already slated for mandatory repossession. I stood on the wide porch and watched the red taillights disappear down the quiet street. I closed the heavy front door and engaged the solid metal deadbolt. The silence was finally mine. The following weeks moved with blinding, relentless speed. The probate judge rigorously reviewed the audio files, the high-definition tablet footage, and the forged medical records. The wooden gavel fell with absolute finality. The judge sentenced Vanessa to 6 years in state prison for criminal fraud, filing false police reports, and severe dependent abuse. She was strictly denied any possibility of early parole. The court officially ordered restitution in the amount of $420,000 to cover the trust funds she illegally drained, forcing the immediate total liquidation of all her personal assets. Garrett accepted a plea deal. He received 3 years of probation, mandatory inpatient alcohol rehabilitation, and permanently surrendered his parental rights. Spencer was officially evicted from the luxury apartment he rented using my money. The local bank repossessed his sports car while he was working his very first shift at a fast food drive-thru window. The neighborhood reaction was swift and completely merciless. The very same people who previously brought Vanessa warm casseroles now crossed the street to actively avoid speaking her name. The local charity organizations publicly banned her from their prestigious events. Her entire existence was scrubbed cleanly from Charlotte high society. I reclaimed the entire $3,200,000 trust principal. I sold the sprawling house on the open market, bulldozing the suffocating memories of that sweltering attic, and purchased a sunlit, modern loft overlooking the city skyline. 6 months later, the state prison mail system forwarded a thick envelope to my new address. It was written on cheap, lined paper. Vanessa's handwriting was frantic, messy, and desperate. She wrote exactly what a cornered narcissist writes when they finally hit rock bottom. She claimed she locked me away to protect me from myself. She claimed the immense pressure of the loans broke her fragile mind. She ended the letter with a desperate, whining plea, reminding me that she was still the absolute only mother figure I had left in the world. I stood in my brightly lit kitchen, holding the wrinkled letter. No sudden surge of rage hit my chest. No urge to write a scathing, hateful reply materialized in my mind. The words on the page held absolutely zero power over my daily life. I walked over to the stainless steel trash can, dropped the envelope inside, and went back to making my morning coffee. The heavy silence was no longer a weapon used against my sanity. It was my impenetrable shield. My new life was built entirely on peace and profound mutual respect. Arthur Vance, the ruthless estate lawyer, became a genuine guiding mentor to me. He sponsored my advanced paralegal certification, recognizing the meticulous patience I developed while trapped in that attic. I spent my weekends volunteering as a legal advocate for financially abused minors, using a portion of my inheritance to fund their legal defense cases. I surrounded myself with a vibrant, chosen family of colleagues and friends who deeply valued my mind, not my forced compliance. We hosted weekly dinners where loud laughter filled the room, replacing the cold, calculated tension of my childhood. The emerald green dress my mother left behind was professionally cleaned, framed behind glass, and hung in my hallway as a permanent reminder of the armor I wore on the night I boldly took my life back. When you spend your entire childhood locked in the dark by the very people who are supposed to protect you, the world starts to look incredibly distorted. You start to genuinely believe that their endless cruelty is your fault. You convince yourself that if you stay quiet enough, if you demand little enough, they will eventually recognize your worth. A predator does not respect a quiet victim. They rely entirely upon it. Looking back at the massive empire of lies Vanessa built, I realize exactly how she managed to get away with it for so long. She expertly weaponized society's inherent desire to believe a crying, exhausted mother. She thoroughly understood that people always prefer a comfortable, simple lie over a horrifying, complex truth. Her greatest mistake was simply assuming my silence meant I was fundamentally broken. Garrett's pathetic role in my imprisonment taught me a secondary, equally vital lesson about complicity. The enabler is frequently more dangerous than the primary abuser. Vanessa was the twisted architect of my nightmare. But Garrett was the cowardly warden who kept the locks oiled. He watched me starve. He listened to my desperate pleas. And he simply poured himself another glass of expensive scotch. He happily traded my basic safety for his own daily comfort. Enablers will always loudly demand that you forgive the abuser. Not because they actually believe in healing, but because your submission keeps the boat from rocking. Recognizing the hidden danger of the enabler is the absolute first step in dismantling a toxic family dynamic. I want to share 3 critical rules I learned from surviving the attic. These are the strict rules that kept me alive. And they are the rules that ultimately set me completely free. Rule number 1, silence is a predator's absolute best friend. Never keep an abuser's dark secrets to protect a false sense of family peace. Toxic people thrive endlessly in the shadows. They build their power by convincing you that exposing them will permanently destroy the family. The family is already destroyed by the abuse. By bringing their horrific actions into the harsh light, you are not causing the drama. You are simply ending the violent cycle. Document absolutely everything. Save the text messages, record the screaming matches, and secure your financial documents. The truth is your absolute strongest defense, but only if you have the concrete evidence to back it up. Rule number 2, patience is a lethal legal weapon. Anger makes you sloppy, predictable, and highly reactive. When you scream back, when you throw things, you give the narcissist exactly what they desperately want. You give them the erratic reaction they need to effectively paint you as the unstable one. That is exactly what Vanessa tried to accomplish with her kitchen knife stunt. Documented. Quiet patience makes you legally untouchable. Let them loudly brag. Let them make their careless, arrogant mistakes. Collect your required ammunition silently. When you finally strike, do it strictly through the proper legal channels and make absolutely sure the blow is total and irreversible. Rule number 3, blood is simply biology. True loyalty is an active choice. Walking away from toxic family members is not a tragedy. It is a necessary, urgent rescue mission for your own soul. Society places a massive, unfair burden on us to forgive our parents, to keep the fragile peace, to blindly honor the bloodline. Respect is earned, never owed. If a person continuously uses your love as a tool to drain your resources and crush your spirit, they completely forfeit the title of family. You have the absolute, undeniable right to cut the dead weight. Actively mourn the parents you deserved but never had. And build a beautiful new life with people who actually want to see you completely thrive. Do not let anyone guilt you into maintaining contact with someone who actively destroyed your peace. Forgiveness does not require painful reconciliation. You can forgive them from a vast distance, or you can choose to simply not forgive them at all. Your primary obligation is to your own safety and your own future. Who in your life is currently playing the helpless victim in a crisis they created entirely by themselves? Who is using your personal guilt to heavily fund their lifestyle or actively excuse their terrible behavior? It might be time to stop arguing and start recording. Drop a comment below if you have ever had to drastically cut the dead weight just to survive. Share this video with someone who desperately needs the courage to finally unlock their own front door and walk away. You are vastly stronger than the dark cage they built for you. I am Morgan Bennett, and I am finally free. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why didn't she just break a window on day one? Why didn't she scream her lungs out when the neighbors were right downstairs sipping champagne? It is incredibly easy to judge from the outside. But let us break down the psychology of what actually happens in a toxic house like that. Morgan was temporarily trapped by something psychologists call the slot machine effect, officially known as intermittent reinforcement. When you grow up with a narcissistic abuser like Vanessa and a cowardly enabler like Garrett, you are not treated like a human being. You are treated like a transaction. But every once in a while, they give you a crumb, a quiet night, a normal dinner. A brief promise from a cowardly father that things will get better if you just stay out of the way. You pull the lever over and over, addicted to those tiny crumbs of hope, waiting for the jackpot of basic safety. It completely paralyzes you. Morgan was not weak or stupid. She was conditioned to survive. But the moment the illusion shattered, Morgan executed an absolute masterclass in financial and legal self-defense. If you ever find yourself dealing with a toxic manipulator, these are the street smart moves you need to memorize. Building the case when Morgan finally got internet access, she did not immediately post frantic messages on social media. She did not confront her stepmother in the hallway. Why? Because confronting a narcissist only gives them a chance to gaslight you, play the victim, and destroy the evidence. Instead, Morgan became a ghost. She hit record. She gathered undeniable audio evidence and sent it directly to a legal professional. She built a concrete cage before the monster even knew she was awake. The audit strategy Morgan did not just blindly attack, she figured out the exact financial motive. She looked at the calendar and realized the gala was a front for a permanent conservatorship hearing. Abusers almost always have a hidden financial motive. In this case, it was a $3,200,000 trust fund. When you are dealing with a manipulator, you have to audit their timeline and follow the money. Scammers hate details, and they rely heavily on your ignorance. Morgan removed her blindfold. The legal buyout at the very end, when Vanessa slashed her own arm to fake an attack, Morgan did not panic, scream, or try to physically fight back. She simply stepped aside and handed the police Vanessa's own forged medical documents alongside the hidden video. She used the abuser's own legal momentum against them. She let the enemy dig their own grave. And then she calmly handed the authorities the shovel, permanently buying her freedom. Here is the ultimate lesson. Blood simply gives someone a biological relation. It does not give them the right to your resources, your sanity, or your life. Trust is earned through consistent respect, not owed through a birth certificate. You are always allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. Have you ever had to legally or financially untangle yourself from a toxic person? Drop your story in the comments below. We read every single one. Subscribe for more real-world survival strategies. And remember, your peace is your most valuable asset. Protect it fiercely.